There's nothing like watching a good film, whether it's a classic Hollywood masterpiece or a modern classic that has garnered the praise of critics and audiences alike. Everyone loves a good film, and these are the films that will continue to persist throughout the ages and outlive anyone who sat down and watched them. We value these films as cultural artifacts because they were instrumental in developing modern filmmaking techniques, or they provided contemporary socio-political commentary that still resonates to this day. While I acknowledge the importance of preserving these films, I believe we are neglecting an important area of film studies, an area which I affectionately call the cinema of garbage. There is merit behind the study and preservation of terrible films, because there is only so much you can learn from studying the best. B-grade or even Z-grade films represent a different side of history and culture, one that we choose to intentionally forget. But, as with everything in life, it's about striking a balance. The yin cannot exist without the yang, much like how we cannot appreciate the good without knowing the bad. Story time! When I was 15 years old, I visited the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. There were 3 exhibitions going on during my visit. First was the permanent exhibition of Andy Warhol's art. The second was the art by Shepard Fairey, who's the guy behind the obey symbol that every dude bro in 2012 had plastered all over their hoodies. The third was an exhibition called Super Trash, and it consisted of posters and lobby cards of cult films and B-grade films. This exhibition left the biggest impression on me because since then, I've developed a morbid fascination for these films. I wanted to know, who made these films? Who watches them? And what's the story behind their making? At the museum gift shop, I picked up a book called Profoundly Disturbing, written by Joe Bob Briggs. Admittedly, I didn't read the book till the end, but what it did was it started my journey down the road of garbage cinema. And what this journey has yielded was disgust and shock, images that would make a lesser person turn away. But for me, it was fascination and intrigue. It revealed to me a whole new side of cinema, a dirty side that wasn't all glitz and glamour and millionaire movie stars. No, instead, it was blood, gore, nudity, exploitation, and questionable morals. Fast forward to 6 years later, and I'm in my second year at Sydney University. By this point, I was fully immersed into the world of garbage cinema. While film studies wasn't my major, I did a few units as electives simply because, well, I love films and wanted to broaden my own knowledge for my own sake. Now, I remember this one instance in my film studies tutorial of that semester. We were all introducing ourselves and giving each other an idea of what area of films we were interested in. One guy said he was heavily interested in art films, and he just went on and on and on about these filmmakers with fancy foreign-sounding names and films that just oozed with pretension. Now, don't get me wrong. If you love art films, that's wonderful. And I'm a man who will give every and any type of film a fair shot. Heck, there's some art films that I love myself. But I digress. So, when it got to my turn, I told the lecturer my fascination for cult films, B-grade films, and garbage cinema. I mentioned things like The Room and Mystery Science Theater 3000, to which he nodded his head and said, well, maybe I should give these a look someday. Now, the guy I mentioned earlier, he raised an eyebrow and said, how can you watch films like that? I didn't have much of an answer, so I just said, because it's fascinating. Now, of course, it's fascinating to me, but to everyone else, they just take one look at it and laugh. I remember this other time, I was sitting in the hallway killing some time between lectures, and I overheard these 2 students. One said to the other, I can't believe they're making us study such a low-budget film. Now, I have no idea what film they were referring to, but I really want to just sit them down and give them a stern talking to, explaining that films, even ones made on a shoestring budget, deserve to be studied and analyzed. But this reflects my point that garbage cinema is a field of study that hasn't been legitimized. Now, what I mean by that is that it's not taken seriously by the academic world, simply because they don't see the inherent value in it. Academics take one look at it and scoff. And I mean, why would anyone spend the time to watch a film like The Toxic Avenger, let alone produce a 3,000-word essay analyzing it? Well, I mean, I would do it, but nobody else in academia would. Prove me wrong. Somebody please prove me wrong there. See, if I could become a university professor, I would start my own field of research into the study and preservation of garbage cinema. But why bother, you may ask? There's a reason why we don't bother with garbage cinema, because there is no inherent value to it. If those B-grade and Z-grade films are so fascinating like you say they are, then why aren't they more prevalent? They didn't contribute to our socio-political discourse or revolutionize filmmaking techniques. If anything, they're a step backwards, as they contain regressive politics, offensive commentary, and sometimes they're just straight up propaganda films, and their production value is shit. Yes to all the above. A lot of these garbage films are, well, garbage. But rather than judging a book by its cover, read between the lines and ask yourself, why does it exist? When was this film made? Who made it? What's their backstory? Who watches these films and why? Asking these questions will uncover personalities and communities of people you didn't even know existed. Alright, let's use The Room as a case study and answer these questions, and you will see the merits of analyzing a terrible film. I'm sure everyone has at some point heard of this film, or at least watched the "You are tearing me apart, Lisa" clip on YouTube. But for those who don't know, here are the facts. The Room was released in July 2003 and was written, directed, produced, and starring Tommy Wiseau. It's a film about a banker, Johnny, whose fiancée cheats on him with his best friend Mark. When Johnny finds out, he kills himself. Now, I know I've breezed over a lot of plot points, but that's all you really need to know. As far as story goes, it's basically an entire soap opera season condensed to just 90 minutes. However, this film is notorious for being an incoherent mess of plot holes, nonsensical dialogue, terrible acting, and horrendous, and I mean awful, just awful cinematography. I mean, how do you fuck up making a film this badly? And yet, despite its horrendousness, it's one of the most entertaining films to sit through, and it doubles as a guide for filmmakers on what not to do when making a film. It's the quintessential modern day so bad it's good film. But beyond that lies the mystery that is Tommy Wiseau, the man, or alien depending on who you ask, who single-handedly wrote the script and funded the production of this film. Who is Tommy Wiseau? To this day, nobody really knows. And an even bigger mystery is, where did he get all his money to fund the making of this film? Thanks to its notoriety and these unanswered questions, it's still one of the most talked about films today. Well, in large part thanks to the Franco brothers and their film adaptation of The Disaster Artist, but even before that, there were people showing this film to each other and talking about it. A whole community sprouted around this film, and that's the value of garbage cinema. It's the people that consume these films and keep them alive in collective consciousness. However, this film's notoriety is seemingly better known than the film itself and has ended up on plenty of worst film of all time lists. But people who feel the need to bash a film like The Room or its fans have either never seen the film or they're taking themselves and their taste in cinema way too seriously. Believe me, there are plenty of worse films out there. Enjoying a film like The Room is harmless fun, and I dare anyone who speaks ill of The Room to go out and watch it in a cinema with a large group of Room fans at least once. What you'll find is a group of happy people who celebrate this film for all its flaws. These aren't just Room fans, but they're cinephiles just like you. They're the types of people who can enjoy an art film, or a classic from the golden age, or a modern masterpiece. They've just learned to appreciate the value of garbage cinema and love it for all its faults. Now, if you did watch The Room and didn't enjoy it, then that's fine too. It's not for everyone. All I ask of you then is to let people have their fun and not judge them for something you don't understand. To quote the late John Bain, "It's okay to not like things, but don't be a dick about it." But alas, my university days are over, and I've pursued a different path. While academia still scoffs at the idea of preserving garbage cinema, I'm glad to know there are others out there who are more than willing to. This is why The Cinema Snob, is my favorite YouTube channel. When Brad Jones reviews an exploitation film, he always gives some backstory into the people who made it or the time period the film was produced in. These are facts that I'm fascinated by. That and Brad Jones is a funny guy. If it weren't for guys like him, many films would just fall into obscurity and be forgotten by time. For example, had it not been for The Cinema Snob, I would never have discovered films such as Caligula, or Dario Argento and his horror masterpiece Suspiria, or Lucio Fulci and his seemingly endless filmography, or the bizarre world of Turkish cinema which sprouted because of a ban on Hollywood films, or Godfrey Ho, the king of Hong Kong B-movies, along with the elusive Pierre Kirby, the greatest action hero you never heard of. I'm very grateful for the existence of guys like The Cinema Snob and the thriving community of garbage cinema fans. I'm just glad to know that I'm not the only one out there who sees the value in studying these films. And I'm going to end with one final story. Earlier this year, I went to a special screening of Best Friends, which included a Q&A session with Greg Sestero. I asked him a question which went along the lines of, do you see the value in the study and preservation of films like The Room and Troll 2? Because I'm tired of seeing film scholars shove Citizen Kane in your face and say, it's the greatest film ever made, now study it, when there is a whole library out there of films neglected by academia that yield fascinating stories. Now, I'm paraphrasing his response here because sadly I didn't take video at the time. I really should have. But he basically said, yes, I do. And when you think about it, many of these directors and screenwriters, when they were students, they probably went to see a lot of these B-grade films at low-cost movie theaters and drive-ins and Saturday matinees when they were younger. So, inevitably, a lot of the material they produce may have been influenced or even contain references to these B-grade films that they watched. This tells me that garbage cinema is far more prevalent than you may think. Critics and regular audiences may not respect the world of garbage cinema, but little do they know that their favorite filmmakers do. While these films may not appeal to everyone, by the same token, not every classic film is liked by everyone either. But every film, no matter how bad, cheap, or gaudy it is, deserves an audience. That'll be all. Thanks for listening.